Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Hi, take a seat, come in. It's not warm here at all. We're not in Davos. It's some other place. So, thank you very much for making time. I'm Carolina Müller-Möhl. I'm gonna give the intro speech and then hand over to the panel. So, some of you might remember the song Money, Money from the film Cabaret, released in 1972, sung by the incomparable Liza Minnelli. For those who don't have it fresh in mind, Cabaret was set in Berlin in the early 1930s, a city full of energy and creativity, but also a society on the edge. Politically instable, growing extremism, social inequality, and definitely a darkness rising in the background. The song Money, Money itself is satirical, bitter comic, and it's about the power of money. It plays that famous line, money makes the world go around, the world go around, the world go around, and it shows us how money shapes opportunity and power, but also how fragile and unfair that system can be. The song is a warning about what happens when society measure value only in monetary terms and leave large parts of the population out. Fast forward 2026. We live in a different technological area, but much of the underlying dynamics remain us painfully of what's not yet there. Instability, inequality, and an entire group excluded from opportunities. And this brings me to a very simple but powerful truth. The world does not only turn because of money alone. It turns because of people too. And half of these people are the world's 4 billion women who remain not fully included. When it comes to the global economic integration of women, we are not on the right track. Progress is too slow, too fragile, in some ways reversing. We still waste an enormous pool of talent and potential. But there is hope, and there is hope in leadership. There are pioneers who refuse to accept the old script. Women who are rewriting the story. And today we have 3 of them on this stage in a minute. The COO of a global bank, shaping the financial system from within. The head of Women's World Banking, empowering millions of women to take control of their own financial futures. And a pioneering venture capitalist, opening doors to innovation in regions too long overlooked. What more could we wish for in January 2026? Then share a room with female leaders who are reframing finance, expanding inclusion, and redefining what is possible. I invite you to hold that one image in mind, the cabaret stage in the 1930s in Berlin, with its glitter, but also with its warning. Only today we can make it different. Ladies, we can. Today we are not discussing women and money as a side topic as it's discussed a couple of meters from here. We are discussing the architecture of our collective future. Who gets access to capital? Who takes decisions? Who carries risks? When women are included, the world becomes more stable, more just, more resilient, and without question, more prosperous. Global GDP would rise, poverty would sink, innovation would accelerate, and communities would thrive. And this is not only good for the 4 billion women in the world, it's also good for the 4 billion men in the world. When women rise, nations rise. So welcome today to this great panel. I'm gonna hand over to you. And I'll leave all that here. That's gonna, who shifts this away? Yeah, someone does. Okay, let's start.
1, 2, 3. Okay. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Carolina, for this beautiful introduction. And you mentioned one of my favorite movies, and I will refer to it several times, I think, during the panel. But right now, I would like to invite to this stage Mary Ellen Iskenderian, Beatrice, or as it was written, Bea Martin. Yes. And Fatouma, sorry. And since Carolina already introduced you, in fact, but when you started from "Money Makes the World Go Round," I remember the song, and I remember also all the perspective that the movie gives us about the terror, about the change, about the catastrophe that was about to come. And to be honest, it reminds me also that that time and today we also forgot about a spirit of dialogue. That is the slogan, the motto of this year's Davos World Economic Forum. So I would like to have those values and dialogue in mind when we'll be speaking, because okay, let's say starting from what we established before, despite of, most of you probably are aware of that, but despite of controlling over $31 trillion in global consumer spending, women still face 1.7 trillion finance gap, particularly in access to credit, capital, and financial product designed for their realities. Closing this gap is not only moral imperative, but I deeply believe that we should have that moral in mind, that we should have a dialogue that is based on values in mind. But closing this gap represents one of the largest untapped growth opportunities in the global economy. This session was designed to show you a move beyond intent to execution. It examines how financial institutions, investors, and policymakers can design financial systems that genuinely work for women while delivering measurable bottom line impact. And the first question I would like to have to all of you, maybe starting from Fatouma, women remain underserved in a global financial system, yet the data clearly shows that investing in women delivers stronger returns. So to all of you, starting from Fatouma, why has finance been so slow to adapt, and what is finally changing?
Thank you so much for having me. So the reality you share is quite concerning, and I've experienced it both as a founder and as an investor. So by way of background, 14 years ago, I co-founded Africa's largest marketplace, which later became its first unicorn, and we took it public 6 years ago on Wall Street. And when I was about to decide what was next for me, I actually came across the very same data. So actually, in Africa in particular, women have the highest entrepreneurship activity rate globally at 26%. Yet they face a $42 billion funding gap. And at the same time, you have striking data from many sources, including McKinsey, that says that if you bridge really the gender equality in the investment space, you can create $300 billion more GDP, which is 10% extra GDP for Africa. It's actually 10 times the GDP of my home country, Senegal. So to me, it's not actually an inclusion topic or only a moral imperative. It's actually a business case. And so today we actually run the largest gender equal early stage venture capital fund. And how it started was quite interesting. So when I was leading our unicorn company in e-commerce in Nigeria, I had a couple of thousands people under management, so I needed, of course, to have some VPs. And I realized that I had, out of 8 VPs, 7 women. But I was hiring based on merits. So when I was setting out to raise my fund, looking at this data, I was, how come, what if we decide to set a target of investing equally, not more or less, just equally, 50%. And that's why I actually like gender equal even more than gender lens, right? So we did just that. And in my industry, we are expected to return overall 3 times the amount of capital we raised for our investors to be happy. And for our previous fund, we returned overall 16x time the amount of capital we raised while having 56% female founders. And now it's really something that's so core to our thesis. It's who we are, it's our ikigai. And that's why for our second fund, we actually came out very clearly and owning that commitment publicly and saying, okay, now we are said to be, and we are the largest gender venture capital fund, and we will invest at least 50% of our proceeds in startup co-founded or benefiting women. And behind this case study, the data speaks for itself also globally, right? So even if I look at in the US, you are mentioning that women make like half 40% of the 40 billion of consumer spending. I'm part of the Gender Equality Council of the WEF and also part of the Gender Parity Sprint Champions. We just released a white paper that shows that by 2030, you'll actually have $83 trillion that will be controlled by women. We call it the Great Wealth Transfer. And in finance, you actually have women making 40% of the workforce globally and in the US. Yet, in PE, VC, or at least in rooms where capital is allocated, there are less than 20% of the decision-making power. So it's one shift that we need to make with a stronger sense of agency and a much larger scale. And I think beyond the example I shared with my fund in Africa, overall the data is compelling. So for instance, I came across some recent data that was showing that women-founded companies actually realized twice more revenue per dollar invested than their male counterparts. So the data is here, and the capital should follow that exit data in particular to be able to make bolder moves, because at the same time, globally, whether you are in the US or in Europe or in Africa, women are attracting between 1% and 3% of the global VC spending. And with the current headwinds we are all facing, it's actually not necessarily improving with the right pace. So I'll pause here, and I would love to come back to that later.
Yeah, so I'm going back to you, Marie-Hélène, with the very, very same question. So how and why has finance been so slow to adapt, and what is finally changing?
So that was pretty much a masterclass answer you just had there.
Let's go. Oh, no, we have a few more things to do here.
But maybe I could take a bit of a step back. We decided at Women's World Banking for the first time to do a 10-year strategy, and we thought we needed to really put a big, hairy target on the wall if we were going to take that long to deliver a strategy. So we looked at what were the barriers that women were facing to finance. And we were sure that we were going to see different things in different cultures, different regions, different languages, different religions. And interestingly enough, across the global south, and frankly, global north as well, we found such a similarity of barriers. We found barriers that really were about women themselves. They, across the board, just had less awareness, less knowledge of the opportunities that were available to them. They definitely had less access to technology, which had become synonymous with really access to finance. And once they had it, they really weren't all that comfortable using it and didn't really feel that they could really navigate the phone to the full opportunity. There were absolutely cultural norms in a number of countries that young women were not allowed to own cell phones, or the mobile phone industry organization, the GSMA, would survey people, what is the reason you don't have a phone? And while lots of places and lots of men talked about affordability, it was only women who said, my family won't let me have one. So there were definitely cultural reasons for the woman herself. The reasons that make me the angriest are the financial service providers, because there is this still persistent belief that women are not bankable clients, and low-income women even less so. And we still see the vast majority of countries in the Global South do not require banks to collect or report gender disaggregated data. So you don't even know who your clients are or how they're using the products or how they're using them differently than men. And that idea that there's not a business case still unfortunately persists. And then the third set of barriers are regulatory and legal. There are still a lot of discriminatory laws against women, and some of them, as blatant as not being able to open a bank account. There are 17 countries still in the world where a woman cannot have an identification in her own name. She has to be on her husband's passport or one of her children's passports or identifications. So there's still, collateral laws are just antiquated. I don't think there's a woman entrepreneur in the world that hasn't tried to get a loan, that hasn't complained about collateral and the requirements that are placed by lenders on them to have that collateral in place. So there's a lot to do at the regulatory level. And so that's really where Women's World Banking has spent the last 8 years. It was a 10-year strategy. We've spent the last 8 years, and I am absolutely thrilled to tell you that our $100 million target, 100 million women target, to reach 100 million women with a financial product or service to which they did not previously have access. We blew through that in September, 117 million women. But and I'm equally excited about the fact that during that same period, so 2 years ahead of schedule, we reached 79 million men. And that's saying when you design a product that meets women's needs, that addresses women's barriers, that addresses the things that are pain points for women, everybody benefits from them. And so I think what I'm hoping is starting to change is more of an adaptation of those kinds of solutions to those barriers.
So, Bea, what is finally changing? Since we had the steps, we made a step back. We look at the net. I will be happy to say that we look at the past, but since we're aware that situation of women is still not good enough in so many countries, look around. To be honest, I could look even at Poland in some aspects right now, or other countries from post-Soviet bloc. And the moment when, because of the governments also, and we don't adopt many regulations. So I would like to ask you, what from your perspective, what is finally changing?
What is finally changing? I mean, all the things that were said here are absolutely true. I think women in VCs are, the proud receivers of only between 2 and 5% of all the funding. We know for a fact that they return higher than men. We also know that they exit earlier than men, on average around between 2 and 3 years. So we know that is a very good business case. But I think you mentioned that before in the interview you were doing in the other room, is that I wish I would have known that the business case alone is not enough to make the change, right? I mean, all this data is there and has been there. I think we have seen progress, by the way, so all these things are true, but I think over the last years we have seen progress in my industry. So as Carolina said, I'm at UBS, I'm in banking, I'm doing the change from within, hopefully. I think there's a lot of things that are changing. I see women in my, age bracket taking, higher positions, feeling the need to give voices to women, feeling the need to be visible out there. I mean, for many years, if I think about myself, we were all working in a male-dominated environment. I think women never felt the need to say, okay, how can I support women? How can I give them a platform? How can I think about, in this male-dominated world to kind of help? Because I think in part we didn't want to be seen as, helping women for the sake of women. And, at times we had a bit of this imposter syndrome of, okay, I made it here and I better be kind of quiet so that, nobody noticed that I'm here type of thing. But I think with time, what we've realized is that, there is a need to do that. And there is not only a need, there is an obligation for somebody like me to actually be visibly out there, inspiring others and showing what is possible. And I think that will make a big change. Yeah. So when I think about women and access to financial products, and we have had a huge focus over the last at least 5 years. And Emma Wheeler is in the room. She's been in wealth management, looking at women and how to serve women and how to design products for women. I think women think differently when they make investments. They are happy to take more risks for things that they're more convinced about, or they have some sort of affinity to, or they have purpose investment in. And to be fair, I think we kind of missed that gist for a long time, and now we are thinking, okay, how can we serve that segment better? 50% of the great wealth transfer is going to go to women's hands, thank God. So, women are going to start to have a much stronger position when, taking financial decisions. We need to invest in education. I think both of you said that. I think it's very important women understand what can they do with their money. Women live longer, by the way, on average 7 years longer than men. That means that they need to save more. They need to think about their pension in a different way. They have more difficulties over their, professional life. I was on a panel before, we were talking about women's health. I think the progress we've made on making people understand, the very specific challenges of women through menopause, for example. I think it's amazing. I saw, colleagues of mine coming and saying, oh my God, this is a real thing. And I thought it was all because my wife is going through it now, right? But it's very interesting. And this is all awareness, right? I mean, there's a number of things that change in that period of time within, focus, memory, that do have an impact on your professional life. And it's important that everybody around you understands what it is, and they don't think, oh my God, this woman just became stupid overnight, right? So this is, I mean, we've made a long progress, but I think there's many more things that we need to continue doing.
Mm-hmm. Just a few weeks, 2 weeks ago, after at the beginning of January, I was invited for a meeting to one of the Polish banks, Polish-owned state bank, owned by our state, and they told me, we need to start to design ESG strategy. Because, we had CSR years ago. Right now, we need to work on ESG reporting, and we need to focus, of course, on environment, social cases, and the governance. And in fact, I did some research about the bank, and what do they don't have? They have nothing to do with women, in fact. And it's not only about not having women in the board, having only one woman as a secretary or assistant in a bank foundation. But they have nothing designed for women, in fact. So I would like to ask first you two about starting from Bea, because we sorry for that, because we talked before the panel, that from perspective of global banking, we could ask how the institutions like yours embodying gender's mindfulness into strategy and treating it not as a niche, but not as a CSR, but exactly going deeper and also, preparing some path for other institutions right now.
So, I mean, I said it before, and, you know, we quoted some numbers about, you know, the money that women are going to have under their control, whether that is because they manage assets, because they own those assets, or because they influence those assets. And that those numbers are well beyond, you know, 3 trillion right now. And it's really interesting to see how, you know, the importance of women is taking a totally different, or, you know, the voice of women is taking a totally different stand in the discussions. For us, I said before, we are thinking about how to serve women in a different way, more beyond, obviously, the whole ESR spectrum, because we do believe that there is a business case to do so. We have female founders who we support with funding at times, definitely with a network. I think where women could improve is in the networking, you know, ability and activity. I think we don't actually use our network to ask for favors, to, you know, brainstorm about problems. Men do that much more, and we need to be much more, you know, proactive in that. For example, so women's founders for female founders program, which has been in place for 5 years. We give support to women. We introduce them to a network of successful entrepreneurs that can give them advice on how to convert ideas into, you know, businesses and monetize those ideas. We have been doing a, you know, advisory, so in modular advisory for women as well, which is female wealth. And there what we see is that, you know, women are thinking, again, I said it before, different when they invest, in terms of the term they invest, the type of themes they're interested in investing. And we've been doing a lot of education and awareness with our client advisors so that they can actually, you know, talk to these clients in a different way, and we've seen really great results with that. We've increased, you know, the amount of volume that we do with those clients by probably around 30% over the last year. So you can see that by focusing, you know, minds and ideas, you can definitely see the results.
So Mary-Ellen, 8 years of the program already, and we already know that, okay, women's banking has proven, in fact, that products designed for women outperform traditional models. So the question would be, what are most common design flows in mainstream financial products, and how the institutions can, and this is the word I don't like, how we change it quickly, because for a philosopher to ask how to do something quickly means, okay, what quickly means and how quickly is possible.
Okay, you're right. That is the trickier part. So I think as we were saying before, that these products that really are designed with women's needs in mind do outperform, but far too many financial service providers sort of design around a default client. So somebody who's receiving a stable income, same amount every month. Somebody who's, they might have a cell phone, but they may not know how to really use it to its full extent, or even really fully understand all of the ins and outs of the product that's being sold to them, and that they have easy access to it, that it's easy for them to get to it. So we're always doing a lot of conversation with the women that we're designing for, to find out, what are their pain points? What are the things that don't, that aren't working? So some really great examples are, women do, and I think we've heard it in a couple of panels here today, they really do, all of finance is about trust. But for women, it does seem to be even a little bit greater, that they need to feel a sense of trust. They need to they do take a little bit longer, as you said, to make a decision. And then some of that is about trust. In India, for those of you who may have spent some time in the financial system there, has put in really some extraordinary regulatory measures and a digital public infrastructure that has brought hundreds of millions of men and women into the formal financial sector. And they've got a very, very easy government-sponsored payment system. Now, only in India could you come up with these numbers. 250 million women in India own a smartphone. And that's a critical difference, the smartphone versus the feature phone or the flip phone. Own a smartphone, but do not participate in the payment system, as easy and as accessible as that is. And when we started talking to the women, it just kept coming back to trust, that they didn't really think the product was meant for them. They didn't really trust the providers. And so we started working with a bunch of fintechs to think about what is the messaging, what is the marketing. If I had known in business school that so much of finance was really marketing, I may have taken a different degree. But just how do you talk to women so that you can build that trust? And too many institutions don't think about those behavioral differences. I think another quick one, and this is quick. You can change this quite quickly. I talked a lot about data in the barriers. So if you've got the data, if you are one of the lucky financial institutions that's required by your regulator to report on a gender disaggregated basis, use the darn data when you're making business decisions. We were hired, and nonprofit institutions love being hired for things rather than being given a grant to do them. We were hired by Mercado Libre. Many of you may know it's sort of the Amazon of Latin America. Great goal. They wanted to bring more women entrepreneurs onto their platform, but they had this terrible problem. Women wanted, the loans were too small that they were taking, and they had a much higher default rate. And this just did not make sense to anything we had ever seen before. They were collecting 4,800 data points to do their credit scoring algorithm. But, so they had the data, but they weren't using it. So of course they were wrong about the default rates when we started looking at their own data. That's why I say it can be quick. If you're collecting the data, use it. And then one just last thing, I feel it's always so important since most of our work is in the global south. This is, Bay is experiencing the same thing. This is not a global south problem only. Singapore has had, the UOB, one of Singapore's largest banks, has had this lady card, maybe not the greatest name, for 30 years now, and it's really, really successful. And they're very good at listening to what's going on with the card users. And they were seeing consistently that women would save. But unfortunately, we know that women often ignore their own health and ignore their own maintenance of their health and staying on top of tests and diagnostics in service of their families. So they were seeing that women, when unfortunately they were diagnosed with an illness, they were depleting their savings, and their financial service really wasn't helping them. So they made it possible that if you were a lady card owner, you automatically got a savings account and complementary insurance cover for 6 sort of female cancers. You can imagine what the 6 are. And as you increased your savings into that savings account, your coverage under the insurance increased also. It's been an enormous success. And again, not just that one product, but they built trust with that client. And they've seen tremendous opportunities with that same client base across their products.
Okay, thank you. Because one thing you mentioned is trust. And the second thing, and I heard it so many times from my students, and the students like young women, but also what we have in Poland, we called it the third age university, so university for those who already retired. So what I heard from them, trust is one thing, but they have also a problem, and when they go to bank, but also when they about to have their own company, with self-confidence. And so, yeah, one thing is education, and I would like to ask you exactly about women-led businesses that constantly, we know, outperform, yet receive a fraction of venture capital. So what structural shift, you already partly mentioned it, are needed to invest in investment decision-making to unlock women entrepreneurs at scale?
Well, I would like to shift the burden away from women, actually, and put it back into capital allocators. Just another example of how, when you design intentionally, it works and outperform the market. So in Tunisia, we invested in a marketplace called Dabshi. It's a second-hand marketplace, like Vinted, for instance, female-founded, Ameni. And Tunisia is a country with 12 million inhabitants. And, before, when I used to be myself in e-commerce, in every market where we were operating, and we're number one in all these markets, we used to have 70% male customers and 30% female customers. And it speaks to some of the issues in accessing technologies that my colleague just mentioned. But Dabshi set to actually start with a woman-only website. So people selling were female and people buying were female. In less than 3 years, she was able to get 20,000 sellers, but to touch 1 million users. Right, so the impact is huge, and it's, I don't want to make it sound like we have a pipeline issue. IFC has some studies showing that if you look at, seed, Series A, Series B, Series C, which is the stages of scale and gross capital for a startup company, you actually have 51% male and 49% female at seed. So women are showing up. But then when you are at growth and scale, you have 90% male and 10% female. Yeah. So to me, there are three main things. One, we need to work on risk perception. Despite the great numbers I shared with you, when I go in the US to raise money, as soon as I say I have the largest share of female in African VCs, they say, oh, you should talk to our foundation and charity. Yeah. And I need to say, no, I did 16x return when I was expected to do 3x, and now the conversation starts. And actually in Davos, every year I convene a group of women that are female unicorn founders to be able to meet and to build a platform to make our story known better, because most of the stories we hear actually about successes are male-dominated, and Carolina, who works in the media space as well, can confirm that. The second thing is capital allocation. As I mentioned, women make up to half of the financial workforce, but only 20% of the female decision makers. As the data shows, so Kaufman Fellows, which is one of the largest fellowships for PE and VC globally, that when you have a diverse founding team, they invest more in female founders, and we know that the returns are there. So we need more of that. 20% is not enough. We need 50% or more. And I think the third thing is really incentives. If we have pension funds, central banks starting to set targets intentionally, seeing that business case, then we'll get the shift that we want with a sense of urgency that we need.
And to be fair, I think, central banks, but certainly governments and other, kind of cross-country public institutions, they do have and should have a vested interest in getting women into the workforce, into reducing cost of covering for medical and health treatments and so on. So actually, that is something that we should definitely think about, or they should definitely think about.
I think one of the problems that hasn't been mentioned here is actually the women themselves. Like what I feel many times, like I'm from Switzerland, I'm an investor, by the way. I have tons of these kind of stories where people call and they want to talk to my CEO, right? Because she's on the foundation side, which is just the funny part of it. No, I'm talking about financial literacy. I find even in Switzerland, most of my friends, they have just no idea about money. They don't want to sign their own tax bill, for example. I'm not going to go in there because that's another topic for another panel. But what I wanted to say, it really starts with the women. It starts with taking over responsibility on your own bank account. I mean, just knowing what happens and not having your husband taking care of the money side. That is a crucial point. Seems, in developed countries, not the case. I mean, who in here takes care of their own money? Okay.
We are exceptional, we know. That's why we're here, yep.
Andrea, you have some clients in here.
We need to create a deal plan.
Spread the business card now. I'm going to spread the business card now. But
Let's invite them to that dinner tomorrow, no?
But I 100% agree with Carolina. I think, we see that, and this is not a problem of, emerging markets, and this is not a problem of education, lack of education, or it is an issue in developed countries that women feel that, they have nothing to do with money, their husband is dealing with all of that, and the financial literacy is not attuned to the level of, even wealth or education. It has actually nothing to do with that. And I 100% agree that this is a very important part of, even with your children already when they're young, if you have daughters, starting to kind of make them, financial literate is a very important part. I mean, I would say for what it's worth, I come from Spain, and in Spain, a lot of people feel that, we are a very conservative Catholic country for many years. I think my mother was probably one of the first generations that worked and went to university and worked, and it is really interesting how this kind of almost like a needle in your head, you have to be financially independent kind of thought was so ingrained in us, in all of us, by the way. This kind of like be able to make your own decisions, not have to marry somebody because you needed to the financial support. I think that was so in my generation for sure. In Spain, it's been so much ingrained. I think because we are coming from probably a different place than many other European countries. But I've seen that, and I think that's a very fair comment. The other comment is networking, and I will say that and say that and say that. I was in a Davos women in finance lunch just before I came here, and we have managed to keep in touch during the day. These are all women in finance, all women with a fairly position of responsibility within their own firms. And for many years, I think we wouldn't have have the courage to call somebody else and say, hey, this, can you help me on that? Or I need a meeting here, or how you guys are thinking about this. And I think now, over time, this has been, going on for, this is the 5th year. This year, it's great to see how we are coming together as a team, as a community, and we can actually reach out to each other. And funnily enough, that's what men have been doing for 150 years, right? So, I mean, we have a lot to catch up to do.
No, we are about to wrap the panel, unfortunately. I believe we have a lot to tell to each other. Since you mentioned Spain, I'm from Poland. Yeah. And the traditional society and traditional model, but at the very same time, women they always had their own money. Mm. And in many regions, in fact, we still used to say that the woman, in fact, is a neck, but the woman is a head. Yeah. I deeply believe. And I think that many of our women already are aware of that. That's why they're calling, okay, let's build the future, let's educate, let's build the trust. And from my perspective as an academic is also to build that self-confidence and knowledge in the young generation, to be aware of themselves, to be aware of their rights, and to be aware that, in fact, and going back to the song, it's not only about that money makes the world go round, but here we would probably agree that the women makes the world go round. Thank you for that. Thank you for being with us. Thank you all.